Okay, so how do you start and work through big programming assignments and projects? How do you make a start? So if someone hands you a specification, how do you make a start on it? Okay, so I'm going to teach you how to approach problems, and what I'll teach you will apply to any programming project, and so hopefully you can use this example to apply to your own projects. Okay, so this question came through on one of my YouTube videos last night, and so I'm just going to show you how to tackle big problems. Okay, now I cannot help you directly with any assignments or assessment items. I will never give anyone solutions. Okay, because I'm a teacher myself. I'm not going to help anyone cheat. and I might be working next to you in industry, and if you've cheated on your assignments, you're not going to be much use, are you? And you'll be getting the same pay as me. So you've really got to do the work yourself. So no cheating. Okay, that's the golden rule. So I'll help you get started, and I'll help you understand the problem more. Okay, so let's do that. So the assignment I'm going to look at requires a lot of knowledge. Okay, and it requires some SQL knowledge, structured query language, some database knowledge, some JDBC, so you can link your Java projects up to a database, so you can load data and save data. Okay, it also needs some GUI development work. It needs getting user input, validating each input, generating error messages if there are any issues. Okay, so it needs validating user input and generating error messages if there's any errors with any inputs. And if there's no errors, then it can go ahead and save the data to the database. This project also requires a UML Use Case Diagram, but there might be other diagrams you need to do. And it also requires an entity relationship diagram. And it's to be developed using the Model View Controller, the MVC architecture, which is a really popular architecture in industry. It's very powerful. Okay, so my advice to you is make sure you get lots of practice with smaller tutorial or textbook questions on all of these topics before you attempt a big assignment or a big project. If you're doing these sorts of things for the first time on an assignment or a project, a big project or a big assignment, then you're going to find it much more difficult. Okay, it's much easier if you do little questions first to build the knowledge, to build the concepts, and then you apply them to big projects later. Okay, believe me, it will save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration. So the golden rule again, make sure you get lots of practice of these sorts of topics. Anything that's required for your project or your assignment, make sure you get lots of practice on smaller tutorial or textbook questions first, and then later, once you've got the practice, then you're ready to start tackling your assignment and thinking about your assignment. So my aim here is to help you get started. I'll show you how to break the problem down. I'll help you understand what's required so that you can move forward from there. So I'm not going to give anyone any solutions, but I will teach you how to think about the problem, how to go about tackling the problem so that you can work through it on your own. So the skills I'll teach you here, you can apply to any programming problem, or in fact just about any problem in life. Okay, because you need to be able to understand the problem before you can solve it. And doesn't matter whether it's an engineering problem or a programming problem or a house building problem or whatever. The same sort of skills apply. Okay, so we'll be using techniques like divide and conquer, and we'll be using skills like read the question and underline keywords. That is so important. Just actually reading the question or reading the project and underlining keywords can help you understand what's required as well. Okay, and if you don't read the question and you don't understand what's required, how can you possibly solve the problem? And we'll be doing a little bit of storyboarding. Okay, now I'm not going to work through the whole question. I'm just going to work through part of it. So I'm going to work through just enough to show you how to work through it on your own from then on, and hopefully you'll be able to proceed from then on and move forward. Okay, and tackle the whole project. Okay, so that's the plan. So like I said, make sure you get lots of practice with these before tackling big projects, big assignments. Work out what the assignment or the question or the project requires, and list out the skills as bullet points, and make sure you get lots of practice at whatever the skills are required before you tackle the big projects. It'll be so much easier and save you so much frustration. Okay, so here's a specification I found on the internet for a problem, and it's quite a big problem, so it does require all of those skills I talked about here. SQL, JDBC, GUI development, user input validation, UML use case diagrams, entity relationship diagrams, model view controller. So it requires all those skills. Okay, so assuming that you've got practice with all of those things on smaller tutorial or textbook questions, you're now ready to move forward and tackle a bigger project. Okay, if you haven't got practice with all of these things on smaller questions first, don't try and move forward. You're not ready. Okay, you got to walk before you can run, and you got to run before you can fly. Okay, so let's have a look at the question now, assuming you've got the practice you need. So in the modern world, where parking space has become a very big problem, it has become very important to avoid the wastage of space in modern companies and apartments, etc., in places where more than 100 vehicles need to be parked. Parking systems are useful in reducing wastage of space and traffic congestion. Okay, so that's sort of a bit of an overview of what we're going to do. It's talking about a parking system. Okay, so again, let's parking system. Highlight keywords, not a bad thing to do. Okay, so the Sunrise Shopping Complex is one shopping complex in Sri Lanka. They have a large parking area and they require a software system to manage their car park, to manage their vehicle car park. So the parking has two gates. There's a one in gate and one exit gate, which is nice and easy. There's not multiple ins and multiple exits. And although what we're going to do is going to scale anyway, so if there was multiple inputs or exits, we could handle that as well. And on the in gate, there's a security officer who will check the availability according to the vehicle type. So the availability of parking slots according to the vehicle type. They will identify is it a registered vehicle or not a pre-registered vehicle. In other words, has the vehicle parked here before? And if it's parked here before, it just saves you entering all of the details for the vehicle. You can just look up that vehicle and create a new parking record for them, or a parking occurrence. So if it's not a registered vehicle, the security officer needs to get the below details, and the system will save them to the database. So save everything to a database, and we're going to get the below details. So, okay, if it's not pre-registered. Okay, so we're going to get the vehicle type, the vehicle number, and the owner's name. Okay, and so if the vehicle hasn't parked in the parking spaces before, we're going to get all of these details. And if the vehicle has parked here before, then we can just look up the details for the vehicle, confirm they're still right, and then create a new parking occurrence or parking record for today's parking. Okay, so there's a little bit of information here on costs. So there's different parking types: car, van, bus, and lorry. Okay, and they've got different costs per hour. So 50 Sri Lankan currencies per hour, and there's only 40 car park slots. For the lorry, it's 150 per hour, and there's only 10 slots. Okay, so the system should be able to calculate. Oh, hang on, let's go up a bit. And so as you're checking in vehicles, you've got to check there's slots available. So if a lorry comes to the gate and you've already filled up your 10 lorry spots, then you can't park any more lorries. Okay, and if a bus comes to the gate and you've already got 20 buses in, you can't park any more buses. So that's one thing the check-in officer or the security officer is going to need to check at the input gate, at the entrance gate, is how many slots are available for the vehicle type. Okay, the system should now be able to calculate the cost of the parking for each vehicle. The cost will be departure time minus arrival time times price. So work out the number of hours they've stayed and multiply times the price. Okay, for that vehicle type. Okay, there should be different UI for the cashier. So there's a cashier UI. When the vehicle leaves the car park, the cashier should be able to view the arrival time, the departure time, and the total parking fee, and the total park time. So you want to show all these details to the cashier, and payment can be made by cash or card. Okay, so there's a UI, a user interface for the cashier to record payments. Okay. Once the payment is done, the system should automatically save whether the payment is done and by what method. So in other words, save to the database. Okay, so save to the database, automatically save. When the vehicle owner has made payments and is leaving, the security officer rechecks whether the owner has made the payment in order to open the gate. The security officer should have a separate UI. Okay, so a UI for security officer. Okay, so there's an officer at the check-in gate or the entrance gate who checks the details and makes a record for the day for the parking. There's a cashier somewhere who has another system or another user interface to record payments, and there's a security officer that checks that the payment's been made before the vehicle exits. So there's this like 3 screens you need, three user interfaces or 3 screens, and okay, so it checks everything's fine. And the reason for this is so that only one person handles the cash. You're not having 5 or 6 people all handling cash. So you can put your most trusted person in the cashier's office, and they'll be the ones handling cash. You have to have multiple points of cash. It's not only that you trust the people as well. It's if you've got cash spread all over your parking lot and somebody tries to rob you, then you've got multiple points for attack when the security officers handle the cash as well. If it's all in the cashier, you've got less margin for attack. You can make that place really secure. Okay. So apart from that, the security officer should be able to view the history. If the vehicle is parked before, so if the vehicle stayed before and parked multiple times. Note that when it is being displayed, the vehicle should not be repeated. Okay, so if a vehicle stayed before and we've created a record for that vehicle, we shouldn't create any new records for that vehicle, but we should create new parking records. So there's 2 things here. There's a vehicle and there's the parking. So there's 2 separate things. You record each vehicle once, but each vehicle could have many parking events. Okay, parking event, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so each vehicle could have many parking events. The question says, draw a use case diagram. So we want a use case, which is a UML diagram. Draw an entity relationship diagram and create the Java application. So quite a lot of work there. Okay, even for an experienced programmer like me, with over 4 decades of programming, this is probably still probably about an hour and a half, 2 hours work to do, to create the tables and hook up the database and draw the diagrams and things. It's probably about 2 hours for me, and I'm very fast. Okay, so for someone who hasn't got much practice at doing this sort of work before, it might take you a bit longer. Maybe a day, maybe more. So depends on how much experience you've got. Okay, so let's try and flesh out just part of it. Okay, let's try and flesh out this part, because this is where everything starts, is at the in gate. And we've got a security officer at the in gate. Okay, so let's try and work out what they're going to do. So let's do some storyboarding. And you can do fancy storyboarding in, some fancy drawing tools. I'm going to do it all in my text editor here. Okay, which is fine. Okay, but you can do fancy drawing if you want. So we're going to do some storyboarding now. And this is for the security. Security at the in gate. Okay, so we're going to do a storyboard for that security, for that section. So maybe we want to have a thing like vehicle number. I think it's called vehicle number. Yeah. Oh, vehicle type, vehicle number, and owner's name. So vehicle type, owner's name. We've got the 3 inputs there. And so that's where they're going to type their inputs. I'm just okay. So that's sort of how you look. Have your screen to look, and so when they've entered the vehicle number, you'd want to have a check button. I'll call it check if exists. You could shorten that if you like. Okay, so enter a VIN number, enter a vehicle number like their registration code, 123 XYZ. So that's the registration for the vehicle. And you could click check if exists. And if it existed, then you could automatically populate the vehicle type and the owner's name. And you could just say to the vehicle then, are you still Mr. Smith? Okay, and the vehicle type might be a white van. Okay, so check if it exists, and then it can automatically fill in the details. So that's how we might want it to work. If the vehicle doesn't exist, then we'd want to fill in these details here and click the Save button. Okay, so if the vehicle number doesn't exist, then we fill in the details. We ask the driver what their name is and fill in the details for the vehicle type, and then click the Save button, and that will save to the database. Save to DB, save to database. Okay, and then we'll have another button, create new parking record or event. Okay, so I'll have another button here, create new parking event. And so that will store the current, for the current vehicle, it will store the start date time. So it's going to store the start date time in a database. Okay, so this is now quite doable for us. Okay, so we can think about validation as well. If they don't key in anything here, or if it's not a valid registration number and they click check if exists, we could say it's not a valid registration number or vehicle number. Okay, so it might be 6 characters, or whatever it is for your country where you live. Mine's 6 characters. So if they hadn't typed in 6 characters here, if it was less than 6 characters long, I would say there's an error. You must fill in a vehicle number that's more than 6 characters long. Okay, and I would maybe disable these fields and this button. Okay, so I keep those disabled unless check if exists didn't return anything. Okay, so check if exists for that number didn't return anything, then I would make these enabled, and I would enable that button there so that they could click, enter some details here, click the Save to DB, and then all of these details would be validated. And if there's any issues, if there wasn't a type filled in or the name wasn't filled in, I would say please enter a name or please enter a vehicle type. And then if everything was valid, then I would go Save to DB, and that's when the data would actually be written to the database. And this button here would be disabled until either the vehicle exists or the Save to DB was successful. Okay, so if the vehicle already exists, you can create a new parking event straight away. Otherwise, if you need to save a new vehicle to the database, then only enable this button when that Save to DB was pressed and successful. Okay, so all the data valid and the data was written to the database. Okay, so do you understand how it works? So the storyboard for the first security officer at the input gate, they've got a data entry field here, that's the main one, and a button, check. You could say check or check if exists, whatever works good for you. And if they enter something there and check if it exists, if the vehicle's already stayed, fill out these details here. Just confirm with the driver they're still accurate. If they're not accurate, maybe you could allow them to be editable, and they could update the details and then save as well, save to DB, and then click create a new parking record. And that, for this vehicle, you would store the parking details, so the current date and time in the database. Okay, so you've got 2 tables really. There's a vehicle table and there's a parking event table. Okay, and they're the parking events for each vehicle. Okay, so I'll let you think about that relationship more. There might also be some other tables as well. I'll let you work on that. Okay. So just think about how you want it to work, and then once you've thought about it, you can go and write the code. Okay, so you need a label. Maybe you might put that as a heading. So that might be a label. That might be a label. That would be a text field. Okay, and then label, text field, button, another button, and it's just a matter of writing the code to handle each button. Okay. So these are just notes here. They wouldn't be labels. They're just my notes. Okay. So that's the storyboard number 1. Let's look at the next storyboard. Let's look at the Cashiers storyboard. So the UI for the cashier. So let's do that. And I'm going to copy this one and paste it. Let's go down here and just paste it. This is storyboard number 2. My other one's still up there. That's still safe. This is for the cashier. Okay. So we'll assume the vehicle's got to exist. We'll assume they're not snuck into the car park somehow. Okay, so we'll assume they exist. And and so the vehicle type might not be this. It might be this for a vehicle type. So that's the vehicle type. Sorry, car, van, bus, and lorry. Sorry, that's the vehicle type. Okay, so this will just be a van. So this might be a little drop-down list here that you had, and I could choose a vehicle type from the list, and it might be car, van, bus, and lorry. They're the four types. Okay. Okay, so back to the UI screen for the cashier. So they'll enter the vehicle number. What's your vehicle number, sir? Or ma'am? What's your vehicle number, ma'am? And then you'll click calculate charges, and that'll get the start date time for the current parking event for that vehicle from the database. It'll get the current date time, work out the hours, and you'll need that as a decimal or a double. Okay, so not an integer. Make sure it's a double. So you get the decimal places as well. It might be 4.5 hours or 4.75 hours. Okay, so make sure you do that calc as a double. And then you want to work out the charges. Work out. Okay, so I'll just put this down below so we're not polluting our. So calc charges does all this. So this is what the processing calc charges does. And then it works out the cost. Oh, I've already got that. Work out the charges. Works out and displays the charges. Okay, so calc charges might have charge owing, and that would be just a label. Okay, so a label shows that because you don't want the cashier to be able to change that. That's calculated by the system, so it would just be a label to show the charges, and then payment type is card or cash. Let them choose card or cash. You could have maybe radio buttons for those. Card or cash. And then save payment. There's a button which saves the payment to the database. So whatever the payment's calculated as, just assume they've made that payment. And also total, so that's the total parking time. Total parked time equals hours parked. So total park time, we'd also display that as well, total park time, and that would be just a label, not a text field, and that would be in hours. And this would be Sri Lankan Aras or whatever your currency is. Okay. Okay, so storyboarding is a really good way to think about things and explore problems. Just create a little mock-up of the screen and it can help you work out what's required. So this is the cashier, so they're going to enter the vehicle number. What vehicle is it, ma'am or sir? Calculate the charges, which will display the parking time and the cost. And then you can get the payment type from the user, little radio buttons maybe, and then make payment or save payment, and that will save it to the database. So save payment will save the payment to the database. Okay. We don't have any bank terminals or things. The question doesn't mention any bank terminals, so we won't make it any more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, but something like that should be fine. Okay, so now we're broken down two parts of the question into much smaller parts. So you could tackle this part You know, once you understand what we've done so far, you could tackle this part and then tackle this part. And how would you have this? How would you have the separate screens in an application? So you could do separate J-frames, one application with multiple J-frames, or you could use a tab dialog. That might be good enough. And you'd have a security in gate tab. There'd be a tab called that. Another one called Cashier tab. And another one called security out gate. And the security in gate would have this screen on it. And the cashier would have this second storyboard screen on it. Okay, so tab dialogues are a good way to do that as well. Just check with your tutors or lecturers and just see which ones they want you to use. Or else there's also the card layout as well, which is really good. Card layout's a really good thing to show separate screens. It's like a tab dialog but without the tabs. So give that a try. So what else can we do? That's about it. So it's just a matter of mapping out what you need, and storyboards are great for that. And reading the question and highlighting keywords helps as well. And it's just a matter of doing the things. So we need a use case diagram. Look up what a UML use case diagram is, and you'll find it not too hard to do one for this application. Entity relationship diagrams are what tables do you need? Maybe they're the tables, maybe there's more, and what's the relationship between them? Okay, and you'll need to write a little bit of SQL. You might need to create a table, or maybe multiple tables. You'll need to query the table, so select, and you'll need to do an insert to insert new parking records and things and new vehicles, and you might even need to do an update if the vehicle's details have changed. Okay, so you might need multiple types of statements there, depending on what the user's doing and whether the vehicle's stayed before and so on. Okay, so get practice at all of those sorts of things, and then it's just a matter of building the GUI. So Java, build the application, and just do it one screen at a time. And like I say, you could use tab dialogues if you wanted, or separate frames, or however you think it might work best, however your teacher thinks it might work best. Okay, so I hope that was useful. I haven't given you the answer. All I've done is help you get started. How to think about things, how to break problems down, how to understand what's required. And we've used divide and conquer. We've read the question and underlined keywords. We've divide and conquer, just taking a little bit of the application at a time. And we've used storyboarding. So 3 basic techniques, and you can solve any problem. Okay, so I hope this is useful. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.